Welcome back to Comical Opinions, where we read them first to save you time and money. This time we have a review of Vampirella number 666. Don't let the number scare you, from Dynamite Comics. And in this issue, we begin the Beyond storyline as Vampirella begins to suspect her calm new life on Earth isn't what it seems when she's plagued by strange dreams of another version of herself with blonde hair. And if you're familiar with Vampirella lore, you already sort of know where this is going, but it's not what you think. But before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell for notification. Your thumbs up helps keep us going, and your attention would be greatly appreciated. Now let's get into the title credits. This is Vampirella number 666, written by Christopher Priest. Art and colors by Ergün Gündüz. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And lettered by Willie Schubert. The main cover A, is by main cover artist for Dynamite, Lucio Perillo. So to recap where we left off from, I believe, this interstellar storyline, Vampirella sort of made some kind of peace, basically, with her mother, Lilith, and trying to sort out how they came to be on Earth, what Earth they're exactly on, where Draculon really is and isn't, in which timeline, in which alternate version of the universe, and sort of settle into the status quo where she stopped Dracula from manifesting himself through her now husband Matthew, and then decided to basically settle down into a normal life by adopting the persona of Miss Normandy, who is basically a elementary school teacher, or at least that's what she thinks. So picking up in this episode, Vampirella is having strange dreams where she's teaching her kids about the basics of reading, writing, arithmetic. And then she is encountering this small boy named Shane, and Shane is trying to tell her that she doesn't belong here. And in the course of the dream, a blonde version of herself walks in and kills her and kills Shane, where she wakes up, and then the whole loop starts over again. She reaches out to her mother to try and gain some insight, and her mother now is supposedly a monster hunter for the government, which is a little bit of an odd turn from where she's ever been before, which tells you something's up. But her mother is no help. She reaches out to her husband, Matt, who she married as part of a basically blood and sex ritual to prevent the DNA of Dracula from manifesting through Matt and coming back to Earth. Now we know from a different series altogether that Dracula has found other ways to manifest, but in this one, she saved Matt, and then but they were married as part of that ritual, and so she visits him periodically on the other side of the country for some nuptial bliss, and but he's no help with that either. But in the course of visiting her mother, Lilith, Stan, who you may recall from a previous storyline, is actually a sort of demonic force who typically inhabits the talking rat, is now inhabiting a human form. And when he hears that Vampirella is having these dreams about a blonde version of herself trying to kill her and this sort of mean boy named Shane, he ditches Lilith's house, who he's acting in as a servant, and decides that he needs to go warn somebody that Vampirella is having these dreams, which portend that she's waking up out of and coming to grips, or her subconscious is trying to find some reality that is not what she thinks it is. So if that doesn't sound confusing enough, it gets even worse from there. I'm just being honest with you. So, interesting fact about this version of Vampirella's storyline written by Christopher Priest is this Earth is a different Earth than the other Earth that we come from. I don't know, it's hard to describe it. Arcadia, I think, is the name of the planet, but we're not quite sure exactly, because what's happened is Dracula, in this reality, Draculon is actually on the moon, which is populated by Vampiri that immigrated from the original Draculon from an alternate version of Earth, time, and space. And it's convoluted, and there's just not enough time in the world to try and explain it in one video. Just all I have to say is this is really complicated. It's really confusing. And so when we saw that Christopher Priest was coming back and he was continuing that storyline and then kicks it off by starting an issue that's starts with time loops and weird dreams that don't jive with anything else. Well, we know that at the very least, Priest is consistent with how he writes this story, or at least writes this character. Right, wrong, or indifferent, he's at least consistent in that it's very convoluted and weird. Anyway, so what do we like about the issue? First of all, the mystery is intriguing. We do know that this reality that Vampirella is living through is not really her reality, or at least there's something different about this reality, that it's been altered somehow, and that's intriguing. That's worth following up, and hopefully that can mean that there might be some way to kind of clarify and clean up this whole alternate reality, alternate timelines, alternate universes structure that Priest has written over the past couple of years. The other bonus, and I'll just give this as a little bit of a spoiler, is the Vampirella's psychoanalyst, psychiatrist does make an appearance in this issue, and he's changed his hairstyle, he's changed his look, and he's also come to terms with the fact that yes, Vampirella is a vampire alien from another planet. He's no longer thinking that she's crazy, partly because her very public appearances have shown up in the newspaper. He just can't avoid it anymore. So we can finally be done with that bit where he keeps acting like she's crazy. When that joke had its time, it overstayed its welcome, and we're finally past it, which is a positive. And as a plus, there's a certain character that shows up at the very end for the cliffhanger, which portends possibly really bad things for Vampirella in the future. So at least it ends on a pretty decent or a strong cliffhanger. What didn't we like about this episode, or what didn't we like about Vampirella number 666? This is Priest we're talking about, and at the very least, he's consistent. And the thing he's most consistent with is he can't tell a straight line story to save his life. This whole thing seems straight, but it's also confusing at the same time. Confusing. It doesn't start well. It's very rocky. Now, to be fair, once we kind of figure out that that Vampirella is sort of in these dream loops that keep repeating itself, and we understand that, okay, she's like manifesting some subconscious form of desire to be back in her true world and true reality, that starts to make a little bit more sense. So you can start to get aboard a little bit. But the amount of backstory you would have to sort through to figure out what's going on here is, I pity you. If you try to use this as a jumping on point, I pity you so hard, because there is a lot of wacky, wild, convoluted nonsense you have to sort through to figure out the backstory of what's happening in this issue. Now, if you know that backstory and you come into this issue, you're like, okay, maybe you're heading somewhere, and maybe this is an attempt to clean all that up, and so that's a good thing. But at the same time, if you're looking at this as a jumping on point, I pity you greatly, and that's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. Christopher Priest made his bed, and now he's got to lie in it, unfortunately. So what about the art? So I got to give Ergün Gündüz credit. For a couple of years there, Priest even said that he liked Gündüz because he's not a traditional comic book artist. He's an illustrator. Now, that's good and bad. It's good in that, you're getting a style that's a little bit different, but it's bad in that illustrator art tends to be very static and very non-fluid. It's very posy. Here, Gündüz is definitely showing improvement, and we've noticed that in the last couple of miniseries. We see it very strongly here. It's not looking necessarily like comic book art per se, but Gündüz is figuring out you've got to do things to kind of give the scene a little bit more motion, a little bit more energy, like the characters are heading in particular directions. The use of action lines, the way you give characters gestures, and the way you lay out the figure work. So it's not so stiff and posy. It's not perfect, but Gündüz has shown a lot of improvement over the last couple of years, and that's a positive. So we do appreciate that, and it's definitely a unique style to it, but there's still a lot of posiness, especially through some of the facial expressions, which is something that needs to be worked on. But generally speaking, the figure work is better. It's better. You still see the digital artifacts, especially through the coloring. So the wisps of smoke, dripping water, they look very airbrushed. So there's sort of an airbrushed quality that doesn't quite fit the character line work, but it's an improvement. So we'll take improvements where we can get it. As a side note, there's a little backup story at the end of this, which is to presumably justify the elevated cover price. The backup story is just a silent issue that shows Vampirella struggling with trying to protect a small child that she carries in a basket from murderous men in bandages and uh, sort of monk robes. It's not quite clear how this backup story connects to the main story, if at all, because it looks like it comes from a different period, but maybe not. Um, is this backup story worth the elevated cover price? Personally, no, it's not, because it really doesn't tell you much other than, and I'm not even sure it qualifies as a complete story, other than to say Vampirella protected a child with her life, and then she eventually gave the child over to a church populated mostly by nuns and a few priests to keep the child safe. Is that meaning anything? I don't know. We'll find out. But I'm not sure that it's worth the elevated cover price for that. Anyway, so final comments. Vampirella number 666 is an intriguing issue. There are some pleasant elements to some of the character developments that have happened since the Interstellar storyline, and the artwork is improved. It's not fantastic, but it is much improved. So we'll take that. On the negative side, priest stories are convoluted and unnecessarily complicated, and especially with the dialogue, which doesn't really mate well with the plot. He likes to incorporate these side conversations that are just there to be fancy or complicated or weird, and you're not quite sure it's going, and sometimes it doesn't go anywhere at all, which adds to the confusion. But once the story's kind of general premise finds its footing, it does get better. So you got to take a little bit of the good with the bad, and the art, generally speaking, is better overall from Ergün Gündüz, which we appreciate. So therefore, we're going to give Vampirella number 666 a 6 out of 10. Well, we hope you enjoyed this review. Before you leave, please like, share, comment, subscribe to Comical Opinions for more comic reviews and analysis every week. I'm Gabe Hernandez, your publisher in EIC. You have a great day.